This beautiful home was built in 1892 as a wedding gift at the request of Charles Deere for his daughter Catherine and her husband William Butterworth. In making final preparations for her estate, in 1953, Katherine Deere-Butterworth created the William Butterworth Memorial Trust to support artistic, charitable, cultural, and educational activities in the surrounding community. To fulfill her wishes, just 3 years later, Mr. and Mrs. Butterworth's home was renamed Butterworth Center and opened to the public.
The architects were Marshall and Fox out of Chicago. And that time period, 1917, was really when Marshall and Fox were considered two of the premier architectural group in Chicago, one of them. Chicago had so many, but Marshall and Fox were considered two of the best. And the same time period that they were working on this house, they were also designing the Drake Hotel in Chicago, which still stands today. Many of their buildings still stand in Chicago today. So the Butterworths hired the best. They also had French and Company do the interior design work, and they were considered one of the best of New York. And so French and Company is who they purchased ceiling painting from. French and Company is who designed a lot of and coordinated the wonderful stonework in the library. And I'm betting that it was French and Company that coordinated that window. So the section of the house that includes the window that we're restoring, that wasn't added on until 1917. We think they started planning it in 1916, but we feel that the window itself was made in 1917 and installed in that new addition of the entryway and the library to the house. We don't know how long that whole addition took, but we do know historically that whenever the Butterworths added on to the house, that they would hire an architect. They would then hire and finalize those plans. They would then hire a contractor and tell that contractor, you have this much time to do this job. The Butterworths would then pack up and leave. Maybe go to one of their other homes that they owned, they might travel, or they might go across the street to where her relatives lived. But at the end of that designated time that they had told the contractor, they knew that the work was going to be finished. And sometimes that meant that the contractor would hire more than one shift. They might be first and second shift workers because they were going to meet Mr. Butterworth's deadline no matter what.
Katherine Deere-Butterworth and William Butterworth built a beautiful home. It was actually originally a gift from her father for their wedding, but they expanded it over time so that it met their needs and was a great space for entertaining as part of the business. William Butterworth was the third chairman of the board for Deere & Company. So they built this amazingly beautiful home, and Katherine Deere-Butterworth said, let's make it available to the community. And we are so lucky that she chose to do that. It's a site that is not like any other place. Well, it was pretty visible for us to see that several of our windows were starting to buckle and bend. We did have Glass Heritage come out and do an assessment of all of the windows in our buildings. We have tens, almost 100 leaded glass windows that are in need of repair. So we'll be working on this project for the next 7 to 8 years. We kicked off this as our 60th anniversary project. This is our biggest and most impressive leaded glass window, so we wanted to take care of it first.
The first step in restoring a stained glass or leaded glass window is removing the windows from the original opening. After the windows were removed, we crated them and brought them back to our studios in Davenport, Iowa. Once the windows arrive in the studio, we uncrate the windows wearing respirators and take pictures of each panel to document the condition of each window. We then take a cartoon or rubbing of each panel to have a pattern in which to maintain the order of the glass during disassembly process. During disassembly, we remove all old lead and clean the glass in a water-soaked tank, using the water-soaked tank as a measure to keep lead dust contained and also clean the glass as it is being disassembled. We then place each piece of glass back onto the cartoon in the exact order they were removed.
Preservation is important to us because this building, all our buildings are really unique. They were built in a high quality way, and we want to preserve that as best we can. There's nowhere else you can have access to the kinds of things that we have here. We want people to be inspired by the beauty, by the hand craftsmanship of so many things that are here, whether it's the stone or the woodwork or the windows.
Well, I've been here 30 years, and so it's been a good 10 years that I started becoming concerned about it, partly because I could see a little bit of glass bowing. I didn't realize that it was so much the leading breaking down, but it was starting to concern me, and it was more a security issue with me. I felt we needed to install the outside protective window to protect it from the elements, but also protect it from something getting thrown at the window. But then within the last 3 or 4 years is when I saw the bowing seemed more pronounced, and I hoped that we could do something, but there was always other expenses that took precedent. So I was really happy when this year we could take the step and restore it. Because, you know, at this point, we didn't have any glass breakage. We just had glass bowing. And, but if we had let it go farther, that bowing would have become even more pronounced, and that's when glass would start to break. And once that happens, you've got to put new pieces in that are never going to match perfectly. Whereas with this process, we were able to use all the original glass. Nothing broke.
It's important to use the original glass and restore the original glass in the window because it's the actual history of the window itself. The lead is made to deteriorate, and it's made, we use lead because of its ability to be flexible and reusable at the same time. It's important to preserve the glass that's original because it cannot be replaced in the same manner that it was made originally. After the window is completely built to the proper size, each joint where the lead touches is fluxed and soldered using an electric soldering iron. It is then flipped over and soldered in the same fashion on the back side, creating one solid piece of glass. After the soldering process, we weatherproof the window using a mixture of ground calcium carbonate, linseed oil, and lamp black. It is mixed together and forced into the open space between the channel of the lead and the glass, forming an air and watertight bond. Excess weatherproofing is removed with a sharpened wooden dowel and polished clean using calcium carbonate once again as a drying agent and polishing compound. After weatherproofing, one of two methods of reinforcement are added. The preferred method for older window settings is called the saddle bar. This method entails soldering pieces of copper wire into the joints of the window and wrapping them around a piece of steel rebar in order to hold the window in place, but also allowing the window to move independently of the steel bar itself to compensate for settling or shifting of the building.
Glass Heritage follows the Secretary of the Interior standards for repairing stained glass windows. And so that was really important to us, that if we were going to preserve the windows, that we wouldn't do it in a way that wouldn't last for another 100 years.
After the windows are reinforced and completed, the window is then photographed after completion and put back into the crate for safe transportation back to the job site and final installation.
The Butterworth Center and Deere-Wiman House exists to support lifelong learning and community service within the Quad Cities. So we are here all the ways about people, programs, and preservation. We take care of people by offering space to nonprofit and educational groups for them to do either good work in the community or to educate each other or other people. We also offer our own cultural and educational programs. We serve about 15,000 people a year with the different kinds of programs we offer. And we are about preservation. We were lucky enough to have this beautiful building as part of the donation from Katherine Butterworth, and we want to make it as accessible as possible to the community so that they can be inspired by really the fine craftsmanship, the beauty, and the window that is part of this restoration project is just one example of one of those really inspirational parts of our building.